Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about writing, editing, publishing, literature, the arts, and more. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Makaya Otini, and today we're speaking with Sheryl Jaffe. Sheryl is an award-winning Cape Cod artist, potter, and papermaker. She's been supported by residencies at Yellowstone National Park and the Edward F. Albee Foundation in Montauk, and has shown at galleries around Massachusetts and up and down the eastern seaboard. She also has extensive teaching experience, both domestic and international. We're excited to be with her today.
Thank you for tuning in. We're excited that you're here. Why don't you also subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends?
And if you know anyone who wants to come on the podcast, please do send them our way. Also, if you haven't yet, sign up for our free newsletter where we share updates, resources, and opportunities. To support the podcast, you can make a one-time donation through our website or purchase a subscription to our blog where you'll find more premium content and resources at thedatekeepers.com. Thank you for being a part of our community.
Sheryl, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Well, I'm very excited to be here. I live on Cape Cod, which is a rural area sticking out into the ocean, a very small piece of land that belonged to the Wampanoag people. And now I'm living here with my family, and I am an artist and a papermaker and a swimmer.
And can you tell us a bit more about your artistic practice?
Certainly. I work with plants. Most of the plants that I work with, I either grow in my yard or forage from areas that are within 5 or 10 miles of where I live. Some of them are known as invasive species, or they could be called distant relatives. I've been using a lot of wisteria, which is invasive, that I gather from Truro, which is the next town over, where some Wampanoag friends of mine have built a wetu, and the wisteria is trying to take it over. It's climbing up all over the place, and it's in the National Seashore, which is a national park. And so I've gotten permission from the people involved to harvest as much of this wisteria as I can, and then I soak it, and then I peel the bark off of it, and then I use it for sculpture and for making paper and for installations and books and whatever else I may do. What I've been doing a lot of now, it seems, is I've been making tree forms. I currently have an installation at the Eastham Library, which is the next town south of me. And it's a 6-foot-tall book tree sculpture that has wisteria as the crown, which holds leaves made of handmade paper that are made of local plants. They could be eelgrass and corn husks and lawn clippings. Friends and people will bring me things that I then cook up. I cook up all these plants, and then I mash them. I put them in a beater or a blender, and then they become pulp, and then I can turn them into paper. So this particular tree book sculpture the paper is 6 feet tall, and it stands on its own, and it is inscribed with Maya Angelou's poem On the Pulse of Morning, which is a very, very beautiful poem. And the installation encourages people to come visit and write a message on a handmade paper leaf that's shaped in a leaf that is native to Cape Cod, like a linden leaf or maple or sassafras. And they can write a message on their handmade paper leaf and then hang it on the tree, so then it becomes part of the sculpture.
And how did you end up doing this? Was it something that you were interested in as a child, or you studied the plants? Can you take us back? And
Sure, with pleasure. So my first art form was clay, ceramics. I was kind of discouraged from being an artist by my family, and somehow making clay objects for use was still within the realm of what I considered to be allowed. So I started making pottery that was useful, mugs and bowls and plates and cups. And I was very fascinated by the idea that everybody deserves to have beautiful objects in their daily life, whether it's drinking a cup of coffee or having a bowl of soup. Relating to something that's really beautiful is important for everyone. And then many years into being a potter, I got carpal tunnel syndrome in my hands. My wrists were no longer functioning very well. And I went back to school and I became an art teacher. And I got involved in photography. And I was teaching photography and learning more about 19th century photographic methods of cyanotype and Van Dyke printing. And I never liked the texture of mass-produced photography paper, that slick kind of factory texture. So I thought I would like to try to make photographs on handmade paper. And so I went to the art supply store and I was given the name of a woman, Elaine Koretsky, who lived in Brookline, Massachusetts. And I had to call her for like 36 hours straight before she finally picked up. She had her phone on fax or something. And that began my journey. I met with Elaine and she taught me about how to make paper. And at first I was making it to print photographs onto. And then I got more involved in paper as a sculpting material. And then I heard about a grant that was being offered for art teachers, because at that point I was a full-time public school art teacher. And this grant was for art teachers to do something in the summertime that they'd always wanted to do, so they could come back in the fall refreshed and renewed and share all that energy with their students. So I heard about this grant and I thought, could this be real? This is like a dream come true. So I applied to learn papermaking in Japan because Japanese art, even as a potter and a ceramicist, I was always very intrigued and very interested in Japanese art and aesthetics. And the idea of studying paper in Japan was really something I'd always wanted to do. And I was fortunate enough to be granted that opportunity. And then I met these wonderful people along my journey of studying some Japanese. And even before I left for Japan, I met several wonderful people who connected me with people in Japan. And I got to study Japanese traditional papermaking from several different papermakers, where they use mulberry bark, which is the inner bark of the mulberry tree. And that is first steamed off, and then that is boiled for a few hours, and then that's beaten either by hand or in a beater. But I do a lot of beating by hand. And then you can make so many different kinds of paper just with that one fiber, that one plant, the amazing mulberry plant, which is called kozo in Japan.
And I love this idea that you mentioned that everybody deserves to have beautiful things in their lives. But of course, it's a subjective statement too. How do you define beauty?
Well, I think it's one of those things that you know it when you see it, right? It makes your heart flutter or you get a funny feeling in your stomach.
What about when that initial effect wears off, like through familiarity? Like if you have an object, for instance, that you initially find beautiful and it's in your life for years and years, and that initial fluttering sensation, that it no longer triggers it, can you still define that as beautiful? And if so, in what way?
I think that's a very interesting question. But I have to say that, like one of the things I have in my house right now are pussy willows. And like 5 or 6 years ago, I also had some pussy willows and they dried and I painstakingly took them off and put them in a jar. And are they beautiful? For me, they're very beautiful, but the beauty is not just in how they look, it's also how they feel. I brought these new pussy willows home and put them in a vase on the counter. And, my husband was asking me about them. And then I said to him, did you feel them? And did you take them and put them against your cheek? And he said, yes. It's like, I think that experience, I understand what you're saying, that the familiarity, maybe you don't notice it, but then the light comes through the window and it shines on, something causes you to notice it and it's still beautiful.
I'm just curious of how you define beauty in general, because, I mean, there's not really a standard definition of what beauty is, I don't think, but I'm sure it's something that as an artist you think about.
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't think that there is a standard of beauty. I think that, there's like the Western style of what's beautiful or the Eastern style, or it's, like a sense of humor. It is very culturally related. I used to have my students who were ninth graders or 10th graders write about, because as an art teacher, you wanted them to think about what is beautiful, this very question. And I just loved their responses, that they would write a paragraph or so as a homework assignment. And I would get, that their neighbor's dog had puppies and they got to, have the puppy in their lap, or they saw this amazing sunset. I think it is a really interesting question because there's this idea that beauty is only skin deep, but then what if you're able to look deeper than that? When you look at cave paintings that are so old and they're so beautiful, but why are they beautiful? Maybe it's just because we can connect with the person who made it, that they were able to express something about their world. And here we are, thousands of years later, able to, we might not understand exactly what they are saying or what they meant, but somehow there's something that gets communicated. And the color might be beautiful, the texture might be beautiful.
Do you feel that you can put into words what you're communicating through your work? Or is it that if you could put it into words, you would be using words and you're putting it into physical forms because that's the only way it can be communicated?
Yeah, I'm not really that great with words. If I have to write something, it's painful. I'd rather do a modern dance or something, or, work with my paper and weave it together and be able to add things like seaweed and color and texture. And one of the reasons I like to make books is because it becomes such a tactile experience. You can put it in someone's hands and they can touch it and feel it and turn the pages and look at the imagery. And if it does have words, I made a book that the idea was that there were no words. Each person would come up with their own words for each image.
When you're selecting materials and you're selecting invasive species, there are grades of invasive species. There are species that are more or less aggressive. There are species that have been in the new location for a longer period of time, and maybe the environment has adjusted to incorporate them versus species that are much more newly arrived. Do you have a criteria that you use to select which species you're going to incorporate into your work?
Well, one criteria is it a good fiber? What kind of paper is it going to make? What will the quality of the paper be like? Another is the color. And, then there's also the availability. There's a seaweed that has come up here around Cape Cod that some people call dead man's fingers, but the Latin term for it is Codium fragile. And it's green. And it looks almost like fingers and it feels a little squishy, almost like Jell-O when you pick it up and handle it. But when you cook it up and blend it in a blender, it retains its color. It's this very pale green. It's this beautiful, beautiful green. So the fact that it's invasive is, perhaps, I'm certainly not going to harvest enough of it to really make a big impact on the environment in terms of getting rid of it. But the fact that it's available and it's this beautiful color makes it a very viable plant for working with. And then I have all this English ivy growing in my backyard. There's just sort of an endless availability of it. And so I start working with it and figure out, well, what is it good for? Maybe it's good for something. Even though I live in Massachusetts, I grow banana trees. Not for the bananas, they don't produce bananas, but I use the leaves and the stems for their fiber. And in one season, it will grow 6 or 8 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
And right now I'm looking at my window where the banana tree grows. And of course, there's a foot of snow on top of it. But I mulch it really well, cut it to the ground level, and then I peel it. If you can picture a celery plant, and you can take each stalk of celery that you take away from the plant. A banana tree is like a giant celery. And then I take those, some of them 4 feet, 5 feet long, and I cut them lengthwise to make them thinner. So I have a sort of a top and a bottom. And then I dry those flat with the same blotter and cardboard and under pressure. So I get these long, flat banana fibers that I can then weave into my sculptures.
I didn't know that banana trees could survive in snowy climates. Is it able to survive there?
It comes back. Banana trees will send out little shoots underground. That's how they procreate. And so I dig up one little shoot every year just in case they don't come back, because I have lost one or two over the years. They just go dormant. You cut them at ground level, mulch them really good, and then they go dormant and then they come back. So Fresh Banana Leaves by Jessica Hernandez. Very interesting concept. She talks about invasive species as displaced relatives. She's an Indigenous woman, and most Indigenous people have the concept that plants are our relatives. And we think of invasive species as evil or not belonging or something, and that maybe we should just think about them as displaced relatives. I mean, I'm not sure where my people came from many, many generations ago. Some came from Russia, and maybe some of these plants also came from there. I don't know for sure, but it's possible that, now the world is so mixed up in terms of what grows where and what can grow where that it's maybe incorrect to think of a plant as evil. Maybe we all have to learn how to make the best of the world as it is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you both so much. I'm really honored to be a part of this.
We're glad to have you. Keep it up and have a great weekend.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.